Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Writers Chat. We're so glad you're with us, especially as we know the holidays can be very, very busy times, and we're getting into that time. I know I have like every day, it seems like I've got something going on coming up. So just very glad that you're here if you're here with us, and also glad if you're watching the replay. We thank you for that. My name is Johnnie Alexander. I'm here with my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh, Norma Poore, and Brandy Brow, who's a new grandma. Congratulations to
You
Brandy.
said the G word.
Hey, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be. It truly,
It
truly. And
is.
I
I'm
know
just not
everyone
used
wants
to
a
that
different
word.
name now. No one wants to be called grandma. Everyone wants to be called something different, but still, whatever they end up calling you, it is just the most. Kids are fun. Absolutely, kids are fun, but there is something special about those grandkids. I don't know exactly why, but I think it's because we're not really responsible for them. And so it's just like total like we are with our own kids. So it's just like you just get to enjoy them. But anyway, I love mine. I've got five, and they are just the delight, just a delight. Anyway, did not mean to go down that little rabbit trail, but congrats to Brandy. And it's a beautiful, beautiful little granddaughter. She's absolutely gorgeous. So we're doing a writer's journey today. We've done that in the past, or we've had one of our community members come on and just share a little bit about their journey because every journey is different. And I have yet to have anyone or hear anyone either on Writers Chat or just in talking to other writers whose journey followed the path they thought it was going to follow. It just seems like God has these ups and downs in our paths, and He takes us in directions we weren't expecting, and maybe never even had thought about. And I know that's true of at least one or two people here. I mean, I think it's true of all of us, but some of us have been very much redirected. And so we're just going to spend a few minutes each of us talking about our own personal writer's journey. So you'll get to know a little bit more about us. And Norma volunteered to go first. So Norma, it's
Well,
yours.
thank you. I appreciate being here today. And they told us, just to tell our journey. Well, I want to start my journey with 55 years ago. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Hmm.
I actually call myself a late bloomer to this writing business because I didn't start writing till I was about 54, I think, was when I felt God was putting it on my heart that, okay, it's time. I've enjoyed writing since I was very young. I was the friend who would, on a birthday card, I'd fill out the left side, go down across the bottom, close it, and do all the way down the back. That was me. I was the friend in high school that filled out almost a whole page in the yearbook to my best friends. So writing has always been a joy to me. I took honors English in high school and loved doing the book reports and the essays and reviews and critiques and all these things. And many of my friends thought I was pretty crazy, but I loved it. I didn't care about all the other stuff. I just loved the writing. It's my wheelhouse. And then as it happened, life happens, you grow up and get married and have kids, and I was busy doing that, and still always in the back of my mind was maybe one day I'll write a book. How many of us have ever said that or heard that said, I'm just going to write a book? And after all of my children were grown and my youngest was in high school, God just laid it on my heart. It's time. And in 2018 was the very first writers conference I went to, which was the Blue Ridge Christian Writers Conference. And people were like, Are you crazy? That was your first one? You went by yourself? Oh my word. It was amazing. In case you guys can't tell, I'm an extrovert. And there was all these people. And my husband and my son, by the way, are very much introverts, big, big introverts. So I'm with my people and I was so excited and I met so many wonderful people. And God began the process with me. And I went there and I was like, yay, I'm going to write fiction, romantic suspense, a lot of suspense with just a smidge of romance, because that's what I love to read. And when you're at a conference, people are like, oh, what do you write? Well, I knew this is my first conference, but I'm going to write And I would tell them what I just told you. And I'm on, just loving this conference. And about halfway through the conference, I get this kind of little going on in my head. So I know when I hear that still small voice to get alone and get quiet, because it's usually God's going, hey, hey. Psst, psst. And so he informed me that, no, we're not doing fiction, we're doing nonfiction. Okay, great. But it is great because when you do things God's way, it works out. But I do have to tell you, before I completely left my fiction work and went to solely writing nonfiction, I was working on a piece that had been brainstorming in the back of my head for quite a while. And I was meeting with our Writers Chat fiction group. And the coolest thing happened because I hear you fiction writers talk about, well, your character wouldn't let you do this, and the character told me this. And it's like, okay, y'all are kind of weird because how can somebody that you create tell you what to do? Well, in the process of being a part and first starting to write fiction, it happened. My character spoke to me. I was like, oh, I'm really a writer. My character spoke to me. I was so excited. And then God said no. So I just had to leave that alone and go on to writing nonfiction. But it's been a blast. So I decided that I would write devotions. I felt like that would be the next cool thing. Well, a couple years later, I went to another conference and was really embarrassed because I went to tell a publisher about my idea for a devotional. And they always ask standard questions. How many days? What's the theme? Who's your audience? And so I was prepared. But when I met this person, it was like my tongue swelled up as big as the inside of my mouth and I couldn't talk. And I was so embarrassed. I just said, well, thank you for your time. And I immediately left and went back to my room and was just so embarrassed. And of course, a little side note, when I told my children this story, they're like, Mom, I'd have paid $100 to see you not be able to talk. But they got to miss that event, and I'm glad they did. But I was just devastated, and I prayed all night. I texted some friends and said, pray because I'm ready to pack up and leave. Well, God knew what he was doing because he had a different journey for me. And he told, ultimately I ended that conference. I ended up going to Linda Gilden's class, articles. And at that conference, I actually won second place in the Foundations Awards for an article. And God just kind of rubber stamped that, yes, girl, you heard me, articles. And I began the journey of writing articles and essays. And it's been a wild ride. It's been fun. And my very first thing was published in a small book from a conference called Write to Publish in Wheaton, Illinois. And it was Anchor in the Storm. And it's just a true story of how Christ kept me anchored through a tough time. And then from there, I was published in another book called Abundant Radical Faith. Sorry, I lost my word for a minute. And that was great. That was something how God just radically, I just lost the verse, where he does exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or imagine. And that was a cool thing. And then I was accepted into Guidepost. That was so exciting. I was blown away. And then in September of 2021, I got COVID and I was in the hospital for about a week. I had COVID pneumonia really bad. My oxygen had dropped down to about 85, which non-medical people, that means your brain cells kind of start dying. And my kids were really worried because they said I already couldn't afford to lose more brain cells. So, they were really praying for me because they were worried about my mental health. And the brain fog was real, you guys. And it took me a long time to be able to just sit down and read anything. much less come up with writing. And what do you do when the thing that you love kind of isn't there? I didn't know what to do. So I started doing little things, reading really small devotions, doodling. I found these beautiful scripture cards that were that you color them. And I just started coloring. And then a thought would come to mind, and I'd go to my computer and I'd type it down. I created a document, and I kept doing this. And one night, a thought came to mind about an article, and I sat down and I started writing, and I just kept writing it. And before I knew it, I'd written 1,500 words. I
Wow.
was so excited. And so my journey began again. And I published more articles with with guideposts. And I even had a surprise book arrive earlier this year. I didn't recognize the title. And I'm like, oh, this is really sweet. Somebody must have sent me this. And so I set it aside. And then one time I was cleaning my office, I thought, oh, I want to see how many authors are in here that I know. I love being a part of anthologies,
Mhm.
um, because so many other people are in there. And I like to see who's in there that I know. And especially in the guidepost one, oh, there's so many, some of y'all have been in there, and other writers that I've met at other conferences are in there. And it's so much fun to read their what they've done and their true stories. So I went back and I looked at this book and I was shocked because there was my story in that book. I didn't submit a story for this book, but that's how great Guidepost is, because if they can't use your story right away, they'll keep it and they'll put it in another book. But what I love about that is they actually included a Christmas story of a few years before COVID. I was really sick. It probably was COVID, but who knows? And I was so sick I couldn't do Christmas. And my kids came over and I felt so bad. I didn't have decorations out, I didn't have anything. And my two of my daughters-in-law said, well, if you and Daddy-O, my husband, will cook the turkey, we'll bring everything else. And so we did. And we were sitting around the table and I said, I feel bad. I don't have gifts. I don't have anything. But I think we could give each other a wonderful gift. I said, I used to do this with my children. And we would go around the dinner table and say, I love you because. And when my kids were teenagers, I said, now you can't just say because you're my brother. Because the reason we did that is I wanted my children to know that when the world is mean and hateful on the outside, you got people here that truly love you. So we went around the table this Christmas night and did that. And there'd been some stress with my oldest son and some of his decisions. And he and my husband's relationship was a little stressed, we'll say. And this night brought healing. And we could just feel the Lord in our presence like we've not felt at Christmas for a long time. So, in sharing that story, I want to say whether it's a rejection that knocks you back on your feet, and I've had a few of those, I've had a lot of those actually, or a sickness or some tragedy that happens that takes your breath away. Take time to take care of yourself and take the little tiny baby steps to get your mind back in gear and be on the lookout for those little moments where God says, I love you because. And that's my writing journey.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, that was very sweet. That's going to be hard to follow.
I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful, and I appreciate it. So I get to go next, and it's just kind of hard sometimes, especially what just like 10 minutes, just like what am I going to say, and what's the best thing to say, and what do y'all want to really know? So I'll just go back to the beginning and kind of the opposite of Norma, where I w was going to focus on nonfiction. And it wasn't because I didn't want to write fiction. It was because I wanted to write fiction so very badly. And I was so afraid that that dream would never come true, that nonfiction was the safe choice. And it's not that nonfiction is necessarily easier to write, but it is more objective. I mean, if you're going to, write a story about parenting, you've got, you do your chapters and you've got certain things you're going to say and you put it all together. And I'd written like academic papers. I was in college for several years and, had done all that. So I was very comfortable doing those kinds of things. I worked for a member of the Florida House of Rep, two different members of the Florida House of Representatives, and I would write like briefing papers for them. So that objectivity was, easy for me to do. And then in 2003, I did National Novel Writing Month for the first time. Now, they weren't as big as they became at that time. I have no idea how I even found out about them because hardly anyone knew about them. But it's the month where you write, month of November, you write 50,000 unedited words. And so I wrote this story, which was so horrible, no one will ever see it. But I realized how much, oh my gosh, even more, how much I loved creating characters. I loved to write dialogue. And it was just like, just very stream of consciousness stuff. But it was just like, oh my, I so want to do this. And yet I still let fear just have a grip in my heart. And then I heard about the Florida Christian Writers Conference, which at that time took place in February. And I wanted to go so, so badly. But February was a month I could not go. In Florida, the um, legislative session takes place in February, March, April, with committee meetings and so on. And there are two people in a district office, the legislative assistant and the district secretary. And I was the district secretary, which meant that during legislative session, I am the only one in the office. So no way could I take off a week and go, several days and go to a conference. So as time goes on, be real quick here, don't want to get bogged down in this story, but I was feeling the pressure in my heart as I would drive home almost every day from work. It was about a 35-minute drive. This pressure that I have loved this job, but it's time to go. But I was afraid there again to let it go because it was brought in income, it was our insurance, it was such a good job for me to have with the kids. Got a lot of vacation time, got a lot of sick time, so it had just been just a wonderful, wonderful job. So there again, I just kept no, no, no. And then finally 2006 came and it was just becoming so unbearable that I said, okay. And I quit in August of 20 of 2006. I'm sorry, 2006. And in 2007, I went to the Florida Christian Writers Conference, scared to death, driving over there. And my prayer was, please, Father, please give me a friend to have someone to eat lunch with. That was my prayer as I'm going to this writers conference. Not an agent, not a publisher, not an editor, not that they love my writing, but please, may I have a friend to eat lunch with? So God gave me four friends to eat lunch with. And we started a critique group. And one of those friends was Jeannie Wise, who many of you know helped us start Writers Chat. And Jeannie and I, of course, are still very, very close friends. And out of that, we started this critique group. I understood then the importance of critique groups. I started entering my fiction and learned how much I did not know. I thought I really was a pretty good writer. No, no, no. I had backstory, I had info dumps, I had passive voice, all the things that telling, not showing, all the things that we have to learn as new writers. So, it just became so clear to me how important these things were. And then as I became a published author and people would have me write blog posts, and one of the questions almost always was, what advice do you give beginning writers? And it was those three things. Go to a conference, make friends with other people. You never know what's going to come out of those friendships. And not that you're using them you know, to get something out of it, but things do come out of it, just as part of the journeys, everybody's journey in our contest. So you get that feedback and you learn, and it also can be an affirmation. Eventually one of my stories won the ACFW Genesis historical category. Well, that was a wonderful affirmation for me when things got tough. And then what was the other one? Conferences, critique groups, and contests. Those are the three C's. So those still are just like so, so important. Now at conferences these days, not as many editors are there, but there's still just so many stories like Jeannie and I having this friendship and then starting Writers Chat together and just, going on like that. And she writes nonfiction, I write fiction, but it didn't matter. That friendship was so invaluable. And I remember the 2000, so I'm going back now to 2009. It was our third year at the Florida Christian Writers Conference, and she and I were roommates. After that first year, we always roomed together. And I was doing okay, I was doing devotions in my room before going to the workshops, and I had brought this little New Testament with the Psalms thing because I knew I wouldn't have time to do everything I usually do in the mornings as far as a devotional. And it was Psalm 31. So I'm going to read Psalm 31, 7 through 8. I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. You have not given me into the hands of the enemy, but have set my feet in a spacious place. So forget about the enemy part because that's like, but that phrase, you have set my feet in a spacious place. For some reason, I'm sure I've read this psalm before. I've read the Bible, through lots of times. So I know I've read this psalm before. But that day and that moment, that phrase just really, really grabbed my heart. And I felt it as a promise. Like Jeannie had asked me, how many books do you want to write? How many would make you happy? How many would make you content? And I had said, I thought about it a while and I said 10, which was a scary answer because at the time I only had two stories in my heart to tell. But I said 10. And she said, okay. And then God is giving me this verse, a spacious place. And then so throughout all the ups and downs and rejections and no's, it was like, no, I really feel this is a promise. I feel like this is God's promise to me. And I didn't understand until much, much later what that spacious place would mean. Because my dream was to have one publisher that I wrote for all of my life. One book right after another in one genre, historical fiction. And no, that was not God's plan for me. His plan was multiple publishers, multiple genres, and multiple paths because I write traditionally, I write indie, and I've written work for hire stuff. And that work for hire has just been such a blessing because it was the way God has provided for me financially after some personal things happened and I'm no longer married. So that was just like that came after that. And it was his answer to that prayer. And I knew, I mean, he had told me, I will provide for you. And he did. And that was how he did it. So I guess just to wrap up really quick, I would say um, pray for opportunities, pray for inspiration, pray for protection. That will also help you when you get rejections because rejections can be, those no's can be a protection. There could be a reason, and maybe it's best for whatever reason you do not get involved with that opportunity. So, you just never know. Say yes to what God puts in your lap. When my agent said, hey, you ever thought about writing a cozy mystery? I said, sure. And that led to writing for Annie's. I've written like, I think 20 books for them now. 8 of them still haven't been published, but they are out there and someday they will be, I'm sure. Same thing. Have you ever thought about writing an Amish story? They need someone to write this Amish story really quickly. It's like, sure. And it's like, I've never even read Amish stories, but yes, I can do this. And you do research and you read and you do it. And be an author who editors want to work with. Be someone who follows directions, who's patient, who submits clean copy, who writes a good story. And even though I have not always been successful in meeting deadlines, and I've had to ask for extensions a couple times, do meet your deadlines as much as possible. I'm sure I've told you this story before too. You may have heard it. The editor of the Amish story I wrote for Annie's. So if I'd said no to that, just think about how this would have gone. Said yes to it. The editor for that story eventually ends up at Guidepost, years later, calls my agent and wants to know if I will write a novella for Guidepost. Well, that has led to now writing 2 novellas for Guidepost and 3 mysteries for them. So you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes, what God has got going on behind the scenes that's going to bless your writing journey. So that's a little bit of my story, and I hope that it's a blessing to you all and that these are things that you can take too. Just be available, say yes, trust in God because he's got it. Whatever his plan is for you, he's got it. So
That's
that's
wonderful, Johnny.
thank you.
Thank you, Norma and Johnny. I'm
And
next.
you're next.
Yep, I'm next. So my little segment actually is kind of titled, it's called Grown Twice. So I really started honing in on writing back in 2004. And from 2004 to 2009, I used to write a lot of nonfiction and did a lot of writing administrative volunteering. So I volunteered with several different organizations, helped to run a couple of writing conferences, and ran an international writing group for several years. But I was really focused on just all of the nonfiction stuff. But it was kind of a strange time in my life because everything that I did, everything that I experienced, everything that I said, everything that I went through in my life automatically in my head turned into an article or a devotional so that I could teach other people what I learned so that they wouldn't make the same dumb mistakes that I made. It was just something that naturally happened in my head. Um, but the side effect of that was that I was just so absorbed with writing and turning everything into writing that I didn't pay attention to the things that I needed to pay attention to. And I just got to the point where I was just hating being so self-absorbed all the time. And I really pleaded to God to heal me from myself, really, because I didn't like always thinking about me all the time. It really bothered me, but I couldn't stop that bad pattern. And in that time period, I had a dream. One of the ways that God tends to speak to me is in dreams. And this particular dream was kind of strange. I had a dream about corn, and it had a couple segments. The first part, there was an abundance of corn on this giant rotisserie, just going round and round and round and round. And at this time, I was blogging, in addition to doing some online writing and writing for the local newspaper. And this corn just fell off this rotisserie everywhere. There were tons of corn, but there wasn't a whole lot of people that would eat it. However, this corn was bitter and kind of firm and wasn't really great to eat. The second part of the dream, I had a cornfield, and it was like a manicured cornfield. You really don't see manicured cornfields so much, but it was like there was this corn stalk and then a really good space and then another corn stalk and then another good space. And there were rows and rows like this, just really very organized, very clean. There were no weeds, nothing in between these. And these stalks each had ears of corn, but in the ears of corn, more corn had grown out of the ears of corn. So it was like corn grown twice. And it was kind of strange. But this corn had a little bit more eaters than the, rotisserie corn that I had. And this corn was sweet and soft and delicious. And at the end of the stream, I was given a choice. I could choose to have lots of bitter corn now, or I could wait and have measured amounts of corn later on. And I knew when I woke up that corn represented writing. At that time, I was blogging. I was doing lots and lots of blogging, really good indicative of that, the regular churn and round and round and round that blogs take. And, at that time, I continued on and I was gaining more credits and starting to get assignments for things. Then in 2009, I had a special needs child. She was born with multiple birth defects and complex medical problems. In her first 9 months, I spent literally every second of my time scheduled, drawing up part medication, pumping milk for her, trying to feed her with a pump because she was tube fed and she had to be on hour-long feeds, and she would vomit the entire thing. There wasn't a second of my day that I had to myself. Even at night, I didn't have enough time to sleep. And for the first 2 years of her life, I spent with one foot at home and one foot in the hospital because we would have to get up and go at just a short moment's notice. Now, shortly before she had come along, God had prompted me to do very little with my blog, but I didn't listen, and I kind of should have. And so when she came along, I posted about her, and I had some pretty nasty trolls that said I was irresponsible not to have aborted her because she was too medically complex and she was costing taxpayers money. Pretty heartless. Between that and medical trauma, I developed some pretty severe PTSD, and I withdrew from everyone and everything. I couldn't talk to anybody. I just began to exist in numbness. and I had no more heart. I was just very cold, very robotic. And I couldn't write because of any of this, because I couldn't trust anybody with my words anymore. So I had absolutely nothing to say. And I stopped thinking about turning everything in my life into a story, and everything just became completely shut off. But what I did do during that time, because I still loved writing, was I turned to learning about editing. So I learned fiction editing. I took courses, trained in that, and stayed connected and, helped other people with their writing, because that was something I could do even though I couldn't do my own. It took me 7 years begin coming out of that trauma, to start to start breaking down the hardness of my heart, that I had really built up to protect myself. And then it took more time to begin trusting other people with pieces of myself, to talk to them and trust that maybe they weren't going to misconstrue my words and hurt me with them. And then it took a full 10 years for me to begin to feel a stir to write my own words. However, it was fiction. It was no longer nonfiction, because for me, still, nonfiction wasn't safe. I couldn't anymore talk about my personal life. And that's okay. And maybe that was a change that God wanted to happen in me. So now, my selfishness at that point, before then, had been so deep that it took a chronically ill child for me to get that uprooted out of me. And that's really how strong it was. It wasn't something I could have done myself. I needed something that would just completely put me on my head. But it did that. I'm not that same person anymore. And I put the right things first now. So after a decade away from writing, it's kind of like it became a newbie again. And that was very strange, walking back into the writing world. All of the stuff that I knew was 10 years old. And I had to learn what the current trends in marketing were, how to handle blogs and websites and things like that all over again. I'd gotten to the point before where I could hack my own blog code and make it look the way I wanted it to. And now, HTML is not the same anymore. Some basics are the same, but now you have all this other stuff. And, add to that all of the other marketing stuff. But there were some things that stayed the same. I still possessed good writing skills. I had the basics down. Plus, I'd gained editorial knowledge. And now I had an understanding of what goes into writing fiction. And it was like I was now a writer that had been grown twice, just like that dream that God had given me. And because I had gone through all of those hardships that I did in those 10 years, I now have compassion for people that I didn't have before. I'm not self-absorbed like I was before. And so now my words and my heart for people and the things that come out in my stories have a sweetness that they didn't have before. And I know that it was absolutely my best decision. And this is a decision that I had made way back then when I had that dream. I had told God, I want to wait because I want to have sweet corn. And so this is the path that God took me on. So what I'd like to say about that for all of you is that because our words matter and impact readers, I think it's better to wait to fully develop as a writer and as a person than to rush into publishing prematurely just to get what we want right now. We tend to be impatient. We want to hurry up and get published. I know I am. I still have a post-it on my note that says, a post-it on my monitor, don't be in a hurry to submit. Tell a good story. Now, sometimes that means I err on the side of writing too many drafts to get things just perfectly right, but I'm not pushing to do something too fast anymore. And for me, that's important. Second, we can trust God with our writing journey. Let God lead, even if it's painful. If something interrupts, maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe there's something more important that God wants to grow in us. His plan is always good. And if we're patient to trust him, he will reward our perseverance with good fruit, because Galatians 6:9 says, so let us not grow weary of doing what is good, for if we don't give up, we will in due time reap a harvest. And then last, I want to encourage all of you that if you have been waylaid in your writing, it is not too late to start again. 10 years out, a huge hiatus. And yes, it was kind of like being a newbie, but I wasn't a newbie. I didn't have to relearn all of the writing skills and all the things that I had learned before. They were right there when I picked back up. and they will be for you too, if that is your journey.
Yeah, you're just awesome to hear that, Brandy, especially kind of correlating, thinking about the times in your journey where our lives merged and our journeys kind of meshed and seeing how God worked even in that. It's
They
really kind
do.
of cool. Um, so I guess that means it's my turn now. And trying to think how to sum everything up in just 10 minutes is really hard. But I think that the journey is really kind of the key thing that I would clue on in mine, and that perseverance despite obstacles is huge. I think it's something that we can all relate to. We've all had those hurdles and obstacles, and for me, there were many, and it spanned over 20 years. So I can't even really pinpoint exactly because God works in little things all throughout, but he hit me early on with a desire to write. As a teenager, I felt inspired in middle school that I should become an author and an illustrator. That was my all consuming thing. Oh, this is what I should be. I love story. Ever since I was a kid, I loved making up stories and reading stories, and learned how to do so from a very early age. But I thought, well, maybe I should pursue it. And so I had an awesome English teacher at the time who was very excited to hear that that was my goal. And so she was encouraging for me in that. And I set out that year thinking that's what I'm going to do. And then the obstacles hit, the imposter syndrome, the well-meaning advice that had, little bits of untruth mixed with truth, like you can't make money being a writer. You can't do something that you love as a profession because you'll end up hating it. And so you should really try to find a real job for your future. And so it's like, well, and then later on, I saw other people's writing and I started to do the comparison thing. And I thought, well, I don't even have the skill to become a writer. So it's best that I just let writing become my hobby. And that's what it was all through high school. And it was a hobby I loved. I mean, I wrote a children's book. I wrote essays and journaling and all the other things that Norma mentioned. She loved that. That was me too, to a T. I even was a teacher's aide and edited other people's work. And that was fun for me. And then after high school, I followed my boyfriend, who would become my fiance and my husband later on, to Bible college. And we thought we were going to get into missions or church planning or something like that. And that was going to be our future. And about 2000, I thought, well, that's it. My writing is just going to be a hobby. We got married. We were already involved in church. We were part of worship team. We were part of a youth ministry. My husband and I counseled at our first youth camp the summer after we got married, 2001. And then we went back to Bible college. And all that while, we were facing a lot of strife at the home front in that spiritual realm because our church was in the middle of factioning due to a lot of legalism that was splitting it apart. And that was really impacting us spiritually too. And so that legalism just felt like that oppression. And it's like, how do we get out from under this? How do we minister to people and say, no, God's grace is sufficient? And he really hit me with it, how much that I was trapped by legalism in 2001 and kind of got freed of it. And at that point, listening to a certain teacher's sermon during chapel one day. And it was just an eye-opening experience. And then 9/11 hit. And all through all of that stuff that was just turning our world upside down, God was like, you need to minister to me through writing. And I'm like, I don't think I can. And he's like, you love story, write story for me. I'm like, what story do I write? I'm like, I had an idea for a fantasy novel. And so I jumped into that thinking, well, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien did it. Why can't I? And I finished writing this book on a whim through the end of that year and realized nothing was gelling with it. It just wasn't coming together. It wasn't something that even I would read. So how could I expect other people to want to read it? And all the while, God was kind of sneaking in other things. I also had a love of history and was diving into the church history studies that I was doing. And my mother-in-law introduced me to some historical fiction authors like Bodie Taney and Francine Rivers. And I'm like, oh, I wish that I could write stories like them. These are just so awesome. And then God kind of hit me with that. It was like, why can't you write historical fiction for me? It's like, well, I guess I don't know. I guess I could try, huh? And so he put it into me that I should do it, and that not only that, but I should take this premise that I had, this story idea, these characters that were working, but not in a fantasy realm, and convert it to historical fiction. And long story short, I did. I converted it to 10th century Ireland, and then that was completed at the end of 2002. And then I was spurred on that, I need to be going to writers' conferences and pursuing, submissions. And I still was very newbie. I didn't realize just how much until 2003 rolled around and I went to my first writers' conference, and God laid me out there physically and emotionally and mentally, because I was also pregnant with my first son in 2003 at the conference, and so sick, did not realize how sick. I literally ran out of one class to puke in a bush. It was so bad. But God did some awesome things there. And to even tell about that first conference would be a whole hour or more. But he impressed upon me that while I was totally disappointed and disheartened by my lack of knowledge, that I could grow and I could learn more. And I went and I talked with a woman who I'm still friends with and connected with on Facebook today, an author in historical fiction. And she told me nobody ever publishes their first book. It usually ends up, hidden in a drawer somewhere in a filing cabinet. And I was sitting there thinking, that's not going to be me. It might be, I won't publish the first version of my book, but my book's going to grow with me and I'm going to work on it and improve it until it is publishable. And so I set out from there to make that book something that was worth reading for other people. And that started me on a journey that it was a lot longer than I anticipated. In 2006, I ended up going to another conference after my daughter was born. Both my pregnancies were very difficult, and so that basically put me out of commission for the times that I were pregnant, and I didn't do much of any writing or research during those times. And at the 2006 conference, I was impressed that I needed to connect with other writers and get involved. And so I met with eventually the online group in 2007, Christian Writers Group International. And there I made acquaintance with Brandy and others. And we started a critique group through there. And eventually Brandy became my freelance editor. We started in 2008. And then, of course, she became pregnant and had all the complications with Jaylee. So we agreed to set that aside. And it was a good thing on my end, too, because God took us through the fire in those years too. In 2009, my grandfather died from cancer, and I was also pregnant with my youngest son and became sick again. And then the following year, in 2010, we ended up trying to move my grandmother out of her home. And in the process of that, a wildland grass fire nearly took our home. And so it was just one thing after another. And eventually, the years got away from me. 2013 came and I was contacted by a friend to start writing online articles through their lifestyle magazine, Her View from Home. And so I began writing for them, doing homeschool articles, and I really felt out of my league there. But I learned a lot about blogging online, and I started my first website in 2013 and eventually migrated that after I got serious about getting back to fiction. And that was probably around 2015. And I realized that all the online blogging and the working for other people was taking me away from that fiction dream. So I quit writing the online articles and I joined Jerry Jenkins Guild. And there I met with my faith writing sisters, as we began to call ourselves. And we started our own, what I like to call our mastermind group. And we spurred on each other to pursue where God was calling us. And one of the ladies in that group put me on to notice about a certain other group called Serious Writer. And and she's like, they have this talk show called Writers Chat, and you should really be a part of it. And I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't sound like something that I'd be very good at. And she's like, oh yeah, you would. You need to join. So she got me involved with Writers Chat. And I met with everybody there, and it was just an awesome experience. And that was 2017. And in 2017, I'd been convicted to get my works done. I had already had several novels in the works, at various stages. And so I finished my second one in 2017, and I began submitting the first one to literary agents. And I met with Sherilyn Bismano during my time in Writers Chat, and she helped me refine my proposal. And then I submitted to Kyle Young through Heartline Literary Agency and got that contract. And then the following year in 2019, after that, I got my contract with Olivia Kimbrough Press and signed on those books, and then they became published in 2022. So that's quite a few years where things just kind of were up and down, and I was all over the place. But God impressed upon me that no matter the obstacles, you can persevere if you trust Him with the path. And He showed me that despite your doubts, despite all those things, I grew you as an author. I grew your work as an author. And now it's ministering to other people. And it's reaching out to people I never even thought it would reach. And all because of His timing, His work. And so I would say, trust God in the journey, because whether it's your timing or not, it's going to impact somebody for Him. And that's what matters. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I love about Melissa is she's been such a blessing to Writers Chat too. So I'm so thankful that she was, brought into this group and somebody recommended it because she does so much behind the scenes. You guys just may not even know, just with our guests and getting them on board and getting their information and making graphics and all of this. So I just appreciate her so, so much. But I loved what you said about perseverance. And actually, Pam said something in the chat, the same thing. We have to build our writing muscles. We don't lift weights. And lots of times that is why the journey isn't easy, and it's because we have so much to learn. Brandy talked about learning things personally, growing just spiritually, and that's part of it, besides the writing itself. And then, not to belabor anything, but I just found it so interesting that Norma wanted to write fiction and now is just very much engaged in nonfiction. And then with Brandy and I, it's like, I'm going to go with nonfiction because it's safe. And Brandy was like, I can't write nonfiction now because it's not safe. So, it's just like everybody's experiences are so, so different. And that's what we want you all, anyone listening to this, to take from these writer journey episodes is nobody nobody just says, I'm going to write a book, writes it, gets published, and hits the bestseller list. That just is not the way it works. You do have to persevere. Don't give up. You never know when that very next step is going to be the one, to be the one.
Writing is very
Oh,
much a journey.
it's
Yeah,
very well,
that's right.
and I got so off track myself just now because I wanted to go back to Melissa. So, here she is, and she's such a sweet person and a quiet natured person, and yet look at that grit. I'm going to be the one to write history. I can write like Tolkien and Lewis. I can make my book is going to be a book. My first novel is going to be published, and I just love that about her, that there's that quiet
Yeah.
iron spirit inside of her, and that grit that says, "Well, I can do it. I'm going to."
Yes.
And it took maybe almost 20 years, whatever, but she did it. And she's an excellent writer. All these ladies, I've read, bits and pieces of their writing, and they're all just great. So,
It
uh,
really goes back to we will reap a
yeah,
harvest if we do not faint, right?
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say, not just the four of us here, but all of you in the audience, our journey probably isn't looking like anything we thought it would in the very beginning. I know mine doesn't. And I've grown not just writing wise, but personally and spiritually, I've grown in this process. I've had a lot of disappointment, things that I thought were really great, and they weren't. And I had to swallow my pride and accept that I hadn't fully put in all the work that needed to be done to
Yeah.
get that prize I was aiming for. And then imposter syndrome sets in on all of us at one time or another, where who in the world do I think I am to be competing with the likes of Johnnie Alexander? I mean, she's just this prolific writer and writes beautiful stories, and I'm not there. I'm just going to throw in the towel. Well, don't, because God didn't make me a Johnnie Alexander. He made me a Norma Poore.
Mhm.
And his road for me is just different. I may never have a book published. I was going to say I may never be a published author, but I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I may never have my own book published. And I've come to the place now where that's okay, because I'm about sharing his message. And that's what we all should be about, whether we're blogging,
Mm-hmm.
writing articles for other places, submitting them. And sometimes, as my sweet friend Rachel Colby here told me, sometimes the things we submit that get rejected maybe were meant just for the person that did the judging.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to hear or read what you wrote. And that was the whole purpose of writing, that was for that one person. And that's okay. So if you feel like you're floundering, it's okay. The water's coming, or the whatever's coming to make you stand upright again, it'll come. Just be patient, trust God, and try as much as possible to enjoy the journey. I know there's parts of the journey that are not fun at all, but when you're part of a writing community, they help you in the hard times too.
That's
And I
I'd like to I'd like to
Yeah.
add to that for my fellow Christian writers who do not write Christian work. There are those of us that are Christians who write in the general marketplace, and you might say, well, I'm not writing God's message
Mhm.
outright in an open space, but you are writing God's heart in what you write, and you're reaching out into the darkness. And I just want to encourage you that as a Christian who loves God with all your heart and you follow after Him, all of your general market work automatically has a foundation and a light that is the undercurrent for what you write. Even if you write in the horror genre, it's a thing. You actually can shine the light of Christ in even a field like that. So I want to encourage all of you too that even if you write in the general market, you're shining God's light in a place that's well needed. So keep at it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for adding that too. Yeah. This has just been really great. And just again, the community, really, I'm glad that, different ones of us have talked about that because it's so, so important. And again, just the opportunities that can come just because you met somebody one place and you kind of just stay in touch and then you never know who's going to call you out of the blue. And it's like, well, that does happen. And it's like, oh, you want to do this? I'm doing this. And yeah, sure. So anyway, we could probably go on and on and on, but we won't. So next week is our Christmas party. It will be the last time we will be meeting in 2024. I can't believe this year is almost over. It's crazy, but here we are. And so we are just going to do like a everybody stay on camera Christmas party. There's been some talk about different games. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I'm sort of letting Melissa, Norma, and Brandy take care of that. And they've got some, there's an email thread. So I've read the ideas and they all are just fun. So we encourage you to wear your Christmas sweaters, Santa hat if you've got one, or antlers if you want, whatever you want to do. Have your hot chocolate, Christmas cookies. Just yeah, it's our little Christmas party, and we'll see what they end up deciding to do, what their final decisions are as far as the program goes. But we do invite you to join us for that because it should be a lot of fun. So I guess that's all I have to say, except if you're watching the replay, like I always do, I will tell you to please join us if you can any Tuesday morning. We're almost always here, except around the holidays, 11 o'clock Eastern. Love to have you. You can also check out our Writers Chat Facebook members group, Writers Chat Facebook page, where you'll see all of our videos. And also you can find our library of videos in the Writers Chat playlist on the Serious Writer YouTube channel. So that's where you go for that. And there are over 300. So there's a lot of things. Some things have changed. Some of those older episodes may not be as accurate now as they were when they were recorded. So you might want to be a little bit careful about that. But anyway, they're all there and it's wonderful. So thank you very much for being here, everybody. We hope to see you next week. And those of you here, please stay for the after party. Bye-bye.